Cicero, the celebrated Roman statesman, lawyer, and orator, stands as one of history's greatest communicators. His speeches resonated within the ancient Senate, swayed the minds of multitudes, and acted as catalysts for enduring change. 2 millennia later, his voice echoes ever strong, inviting us to uncover the keys to persuasive communication, clarity of thought, and the commanding presence that shaped a civilization. In our current age, a time beset by digitized discourse, fractured attention, and polarized debates, developing genuine eloquence and persuasive power is more vital than ever. Whether you strive to lead in boardrooms, inspire audiences from a podium, negotiate with strategic finesse, or desire to defend truth within personal dialogues, Cicero's teachings offer a timeless blueprint for success. To speak like Cicero is not simply to recite well-crafted phrases, but to embody a philosophy where words are wielded as tools for connection, conviction, and truth. This work undertakes a comprehensive journey through Cicero's rhetorical mastery. Each chapter distills his approaches from the art of persuasion cultivated in heated debates and negotiations to the subtleties of active, empathic listening, a Cicero hallmark often overshadowed by his oratorical feats. You will learn how to confront and transcend the fears and anxieties that afflict modern speakers, formulating speeches that leave a lasting impression on collective memory. In exploring the ethical foundation of Cicero's method, speaking with unwavering integrity, you will be equipped for advocacy grounded in truth and justice, the adaptation of these ancient techniques to contemporary audiences reveals striking relevance. The principles that swayed Roman senators underpin TED Talks, courtroom summations, company pitches, political speeches, and interpersonal exchanges alike. Cicero's famous speeches serve not as relics, but as living case studies, each lesson enriched by analysis and context. Through consistent practice, you will internalize the cadence and command of language, forging the discipline to nurture eloquence each day. As you progress, this text evolves from the foundations of rhetoric to the personal evolution of the modern orator, guiding you to become a persuasive leader grounded in the best traditions of human expression. Cicero's wisdom transcends mere style. It imparts the substance necessary for influence and leadership in any era. Prepare to journey with the greatest orator of antiquity, transforming ancient art into contemporary mastery, elevating your voice to speak with conviction, clarity, and power. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1. The Voice of Rome. Why Cicero Still Speaks to Us. From the marble halls of the Roman Senate to the bustling law courts of the Forum, Cicero's voice resounded with authority, wit, and moral force. His words were not shaped only by the conventions of Roman society or the needs of his aristocratic patrons. They embodied an aspiration for something grander, a vision of public life governed by reasoned discourse, democratic ideals, and the pursuit of justice. Why, then, does Cicero's voice still speak to us? The answer lies in the universality of his message and the perpetuity of the principles he championed. Cicero's contributions were manifold. He elucidated the techniques of effective communication, set forth ethical standards for civic engagement, and demonstrated through his career the pivotal role of eloquence in shaping history. Through adversity and triumph, exile and political intrigue, Cicero stood unwavering in his belief that words, carefully chosen and ethically deployed, could change the world. His influence extends well beyond rhetoric. Cicero's impact on Western intellectual traditions is profound. His writings form the backbone of both rhetorical instruction and philosophical reflection. In articulating the ideals of Roman republicanism, Cicero inspired Renaissance thinkers, shaped the curricula of medieval universities, and set the standard for persuasive speech for centuries to follow. The classical world venerated him not just as an orator, but as a philosopher, a statesman, and a guide to virtuous living. In the 21st century, the power of speech remains undiminished. The challenges we face, polarization, misinformation, ideological division, are not dissimilar from those Cicero confronted in a Rome teetering between order and chaos. His belief in reason, his commitment to truth, and his understanding of the subtle interplay between emotion and logic underline the necessity of eloquence in public life. Cicero teaches us to listen, to reason, and then to persuade. The art of rhetoric is not a tool for manipulation, but a vehicle for advancing discourse, settling disputes, and forging community. This chapter explores the historical context in which Cicero operated, illuminating the dynamics of Roman society that made rhetoric indispensable. It assesses Cicero's lasting legacy, from his use of speech to navigate perilous political waters to his enduring presence in the curriculum of Western education. It argues that we need Cicero's voice more urgently than ever, that in reclaiming the art of eloquence, we recapture the possibility of thoughtful engagement and constructive dialogue amid the cacophony of modern society. We begin, then, by listening anew to Cicero's words, his convictions, and the living tradition he represents. Through his example, we come to understand not only how to speak, but why speech matters, how the careful shaping of words can inform, inspire, and unite. To speak like Cicero is to engage in the perennial quest for truth and understanding, to summon the highest ideals of community, and to honor the sacred responsibility of speech in the public square. Chapter 2, Foundations of Eloquence, Cicero's Life and Times. To appreciate the eloquence that defined Cicero, one must begin with the circumstances of his life, his ascent from modest origins in Arpinum, his educational journey, the political turbulence that marked his career, and his relentless pursuit of excellence in rhetoric. Marcus Tullius Cicero was born in 106 BCE to a family of the equestrian order, a social rung below Rome's aristocratic elite. Unlike many contemporaries whose positions were secured by lineage, Cicero's rise depended on intellect, diligence, and rhetorical prowess. From his early youth, Cicero immersed himself in the study of language and philosophy, drawing from both Greek masters and Roman traditions. He was tutored by renowned scholars, absorbing lessons in logic, oratory, and ethical reflection. Cicero's era was one of profound transformation. Rome had emerged as a Mediterranean superpower, but its republican institutions were threatened by factionalism, ambition, and the legacies of recent civil wars. Political careers demanded mastery not only of martial skill, but increasingly of rhetorical ability. The law courts, public assemblies, and senate became battlegrounds for influence, and orators assumed roles akin to contemporary media figures and policymakers. Cicero's motivation was twofold: personal advancement and civic duty. Unlike many of his age, Cicero believed that eloquence was inseparable from virtue. His education stressed the unity of philosophy and rhetoric. Speeches should not merely persuade, but enlighten, defend ethical standards, and serve the common good. His philosophical works, particularly De Oratore and De Republica, reflect a synthesis of Platonic ideals and Roman pragmatism. Early on, Cicero distinguished himself with audacious legal defenses, navigating complex cases and earning the admiration of both patrons and rivals. His inner conviction that words could serve as instruments of justice propelled him to the consulship in 63 BCE, the highest office in Rome. As consul, Cicero's speeches against the conspirator Catiline remain exemplary in their force, structure, and moral fervor. They reveal a statesman acutely aware of the power of language to safeguard institutions and sway the multitude. Yet Cicero was no stranger to adversity. Exiled by political opponents, subjected to personal risks, and ultimately falling victim to the machinations of the triumvirs, he endured hardship with stoic resolve. In adversity, his reliance on rhetoric became pronounced, not as mere ornament, but as a lifeline, a means of defending principles against overwhelming odds. Cicero's legacy endures through his willingness to learn, adapt and teach. His letters, treatises, and orations have survived almost intact, offering insight into both the mechanics of speech and the ethical responsibilities of the speaker. He advocated a thorough understanding of audience psychology, careful arrangement of arguments, and the pursuit of clarity and beauty in language. By examining Cicero's life and times, we uncover the roots of his eloquence, a product not of privilege, but of relentless study and ethical commitment. His journey affirms the enduring truth that great speech is not born, but made. Forged in the crucible of adversity, nourished by discipline, and guided by the conviction that words, above all, possess the power to shape destiny. Chapter 3. The 5 Canons of Rhetoric: Invention, Arrangement, Style, Memory, Delivery. Having traced Cicero's life and the context of his accomplishments, we now turn to the architectural foundation of his art, the 5 Canons of Rhetoric, principles that have guided speakers from antiquity to our own time. Invention, inventio. The first canon concerns the discovery of arguments. Cicero taught that every speech must begin with rigorous exploration, a search for ideas, facts, and persuasive appeals appropriate to purpose and audience. Invention demands both creativity and intellectual discipline, blending philosophical inquiry with practical investigation. Cicero classified arguments into categories: factual, legal, ethical, and emotional, each suited to different occasions. Arrangement, dispositio. Cicero insisted that the ordering of material is as crucial as its selection. A speech that meanders confuses both orator and audience. Thus, arrangement organizes arguments into an intelligible sequence, ensuring that each point builds towards the intended conclusion. Cicero favored the classic structure: introduction, statement of facts, proof, refutation, and conclusion. Each segment assigned a defined role in persuading the listener. Style, elocutio, style. For Cicero was the clothing of thought, language chosen for clarity, force and aesthetic appeal. Cicero's mastery of metaphor, rhythm, and vivid imagery elevated his speeches. He taught that style must serve the argument, avoiding excess or obscurity and adapting to audience expectations and context. Persuasive speech, according to Cicero, blends grandeur with simplicity, balancing ornament with comprehensibility. Memory, memoria. In an age before printed texts, memory was indispensable. Cicero advocated mnemonic techniques, visualization, repetition, ordered associations, to retain structure and detail. A speaker must internalize not only facts, but the flow and rhythm of the speech, ensuring spontaneity and confidence before even the most demanding assemblies. Delivery, pronunciatio, the final canon. Delivery integrates voice, gesture, and physical presence. Cicero's speeches were renowned for their expressive intonation, controlled modulation, and commanding gestures. He believed that delivery animates the written word, imparting emotion and authenticity. The most persuasive argument falters if marred by monotony or awkwardness. Thus, Cicero urged continual practice, mindful of posture, breath, and eye contact. The 5 canons form an interlocking system, a method for transforming thought into action, intention into influence. Cicero's synthesis remains the gold standard for orators, equipping speakers with the tools necessary to discern truth, organize complexity, express themselves elegantly, remember with precision, and perform with confidence. This chapter unpacks each canon in detail, offering insight into the ways Cicero refined them and how modern speakers can draw from his example. Through careful study of invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery, we unlock the mechanics of persuasive speech and glimpse the enduring artistry at the heart of Cicero's legacy. Chapter 4. Thinking before speaking. Logic and clarity in arguments. Cicero's philosophy of speech began with thought. Before utterance, before gesture, before the exhilarating engagement of debate, the foundation was laid in rigorous cognition, logical reflection, analytical scrutiny, and intellectual clarity. For Cicero, words divorced from thought were not merely ineffective. They were dangerous, prone to mislead rather than enlighten. In this chapter, we delve into Cicero's emphasis on logic as the bedrock of persuasion. The orator, he contended, must be more than an entertainer or mere conveyor of emotion. Sound argumentation, rooted in clear premises and valid inference, underpins all effective speech. Cicero's approach, indebted to the dialecticians of Greece, married philosophical principles with forensic practicality. Cicero advocated for the thorough dissection of claims, identifying core propositions, distinguishing evidence from supposition, and anticipating counter-arguments. He cautioned against the seductive allure of rhetorical flourish unanchored in reason, reminding speakers that sophistry, while dazzling, ultimately corrodes trust. To cultivate clarity, Cicero recommended several practices. Definition of terms. Ambiguity breeds confusion. Cicero's speeches are meticulous in defining key concepts, whether in legal, ethical, or political contexts. He insisted that orators clarify terms early, thereby forestalling misinterpretation and guiding audience understanding. Structure of argument. Reasoned speech flows from premise to conclusion with unbroken logic. Cicero modeled syllogistic reasoning, presenting major premises, then supporting them with evidence and proceeding methodically to deduction. This structure makes complex arguments intelligible and invites assent. Avoidance of fallacies. Cicero catalogued dialectical errors, false equivalence, ad hominem attacks, circular reasoning, and non sequiturs. He trained his students to recognize and preempt these pitfalls, reinforcing credibility and intellectual rigor. Integration of evidence. Cicero's speeches marshal facts, witness testimony, and precedent with analytical precision. He urged speakers to weigh sources carefully, discriminate between reliable and dubious information, and contextualize data. Logical economy. Brevity, Cicero observed, is allied to clarity. He avoided digression, focusing on essential points and employing concise formulations. This economy sharpened impact, preventing distraction and fatigue. Cicero's model for clear and logical speech transcends mere technique. It embodies an ethical ideal. The speaker's responsibility, he affirmed, is to illuminate, not obscure. To illuminate truth, advocate with reason, and respect both audience and adversary. In public life, as in private inquiry, logic is the anchor amid turbulent seas. This chapter demonstrates how Cicero's method transforms complex issues into manageable, persuasive arguments, empowering speakers to engage constructively with difficult subjects. In a world flooded with information but often thin in understanding, Cicero's lessons in logic and clarity are more vital than ever. A call to think deeply, speak honestly, and persuade honorably. Chapter 5. Structuring a speech. Introduction, narration, proof, refutation, conclusion. If logic and clarity form the foundation of persuasive speech, structure is its architecture. Cicero was a master constructor, organizing his addresses so that arguments unfolded with compelling inevitability, each section amplifying and reinforcing the whole. Cicero taught that effective speeches are composed of 5 distinct parts, each fulfilling a critical function in persuasion. Introduction, exordium. The exordium aims to capture attention and establish rapport. Cicero believed that an opening must be tailored to the occasion, audience, and subject matter. Sometimes he began with a statement of shared values or invoked common experience. Other times, he began with a pointed anecdote or strategic provocation. The goal was not merely to announce the topic, but to create receptivity, narration, narratio. In the narratio, Cicero set forth the background, providing context and summarizing relevant facts. Clarity is paramount. A lucid narrative frames subsequent arguments and grounds audience expectations. Cicero was careful to select details that supported his thesis, omitting extraneous material and presenting events in logical sequence. Proof confirmatio. The heart of the speech consists of proof, the presentation of reasons, evidence and appeals that support the speaker's central claim. Cicero marshaled legal precedent, moral reasoning, and emotional appeals, often layering arguments in order of increasing potency. He advocated for a blend of rational analysis and evocative illustration, each tailored to the mindset of the listeners. Refutation, refutatio. Cicero routinely anticipated objections, devoting significant attention to refuting adversaries' claims. He distinguished between substantive and specious counterarguments, carefully dismantling fallacies while remaining respectful. This practice not only neutralized opposition, but showcased the speaker's command of the subject and integrity. Conclusion, peroratio. The final section, peroratio, sought not only to summarize, but to leave a lasting impression. Cicero's conclusions were often impassioned, invoking ethical imperatives, civic duty, or the gravity of consequence. He called upon the emotions, pity, indignation, hope, urging his audience toward decision and action. Cicero's structural model remains influential in disciplines ranging from law to literature to politics. Its rigor provides coherence and persuasive force. Its flexibility allows adaptation to diverse contexts. This chapter dissects Cicero's approach, illustrating each part with historical examples and offering guidance for implementation. Through mastery of structure, the orator moves from mere argument to artistry, constructing speeches that not only convince, but endure. Chapter 6. The Power of Words, Choosing Language that Moves and Persuades. At the heart of Cicero's genius was his sensitivity to language, the subtle music of words chosen not for ornament alone, but to move hearts and influence minds. In his hands, Latin became a supple instrument, capable of conveying the loftiest ideals and the most intricate reasoning with equal vigor. Cicero's approach to diction was both practical and philosophical. He regarded words as bearers of thought, each requiring precision, appropriateness, and emotional resonance. He rejected obscurity and affectation. Instead, he advocated for clarity coupled with vividness, arguing that language should neither distract nor diminish, but rather illuminate and inspire. Several key techniques characterize Cicero's use of language. Precision. Cicero's sentences avoid vagueness. Whether defining legal statutes or ethical principles, he chooses terms that precisely express his intent. This precision prevents misunderstanding and grounds the argument in reality. Vivid imagery. Cicero often employed metaphors, analogies, and evocative images. These figures of speech rendered abstract concepts palpable, engaged the imagination, and facilitated memory. His orations are replete with references to nature, myth, and daily life, bridging cognitive gaps between speaker and listener. Varied syntax. The arrangement of Cicero's clauses exhibits intentional variety, modulating emphasis, pacing, and emotional impact. By altering sentence length and structure, he enhances both clarity and dramatic effect. Repetition and parallelism. Cicero understood the mnemonic and rhetorical power of repetition. He deployed parallel constructions to emphasize key points and reinforce memory, ensuring his message lingered after the speech ended. Adaptability. No two audiences are alike. Cicero tailored his language to the occasion, employing colloquial vigor in the forum, philosophical solemnity before learned assemblies, and juridical rigor in the courts. He advised orators to study the cultural and intellectual landscape of their listeners, emotional color. Cicero's words often carried an undercurrent of passion. He balanced reasoned argument with appeals to sympathy, indignation, or hope, combining logos and pathos to memorable effect. Cicero's lessons in the power of words extend beyond mechanics. They express a philosophy of communication rooted in respect for the audience and the subject. Language, he argued, should not only convey but elevate, fostering understanding and unity. In a world often anesthetized by jargon and cliché, Cicero's devotion to living speech offers a timeless remedy. This chapter explores how to choose and craft language that moves and persuades, drawing on Cicero's examples and providing practical strategies for contemporary speakers committed to beauty, clarity, and ethical impact. Chapter 7, Rhythm and Cadence, Making Your Speech Musical. Cicero likened speech to music, believing that the cadence and rhythm of words can enchant, invigorate, and persuade as powerfully as argument. The musicality of his orations, a clear, measured, and harmonious flow, distinguished him from his rivals, captivating audiences and reinforcing meaning. Rhythm and cadence in speech emerged through a combination of linguistic choices and performative skill. Cicero was attentive to syllabic patterns. Cicero varied syllable length, exploiting the natural rhythm intrinsic to Latin and adapting it for emotional effect. He interspersed short, punchy clauses with longer rolling sentences, mirroring the tides of argument and emotion. Pauses, conscious use of silence accentuated Cicero's delivery, allowing audiences to absorb complex ideas and signaling transitions. He employed pauses strategically to emphasize important points, give listeners time to reflect and heighten anticipation. Repetitive phrasing, when judiciously employed, creates rhythm and reinforces key themes. Cicero often repeated critical terms, structuring his speeches to echo their most salient elements, thereby cementing them in memory. Balance and contrast. Cicero mastered antithesis, juxtaposing opposites to create symmetry and sharpen distinction. His use of parallel structures and balanced sentences contributed to a musical perception, pleasing both intellect and ear. Modulation of tone and volume. Delivery, for Cicero, involved careful calibration of tone. He rose to passion or subsided to earnestness as argument demanded, signaling both logical progression and emotional gravity. Harmony with content. Cicero's rhythm served his message. Passion required rising tempo. Solemnity measured cadence. He taught that the most musical speeches are those whose rhythm reinforces their substance, making style serve argument, not overshadow it. Through rhythmic subtlety, Cicero augmented the persuasive power of his orations. The interplay of sound and sense, pace and pause, transforms speech into experience. Listeners do not merely apprehend argument. They feel its force, its urgency, its beauty. This chapter instructs in the identification and cultivation of rhythm and cadence, providing exercises and examples to help speakers develop a musical approach to oratory. Through attentive crafting and mindful practice, one may aspire to the artistry that marked Cicero's unforgettable voice. Chapter 8. Balancing Emotion and Reason, Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. At the heart of Cicero's rhetorical genius lies an understanding of the fundamental pillars of persuasion: ethos, pathos, and logos. Each of these, derived from the teachings of Aristotle, represents a distinct element in the architecture of effective speech. The harmonious interplay among ethical credibility, emotional resonance, and logical reasoning forms the backbone not only of Cicero's oratory, but of all compelling communication. Ethos. Establishing credibility. Ethos refers to the speaker's character, the perceived integrity, authority, and trustworthiness projected to the audience. For Cicero, ethos was cultivated through a combination of reputation, displays of moral uprightness, and the subtle emphasis of shared values with his listeners. To persuade, one must first be believed. Cicero would anchor his speeches with references to his public service, legal expertise, or personal sacrifices, reminding his audience of his reliability and commitment to the common good. Modern speakers can emulate Cicero's ethos by thoroughly preparing their material, displaying respect for opposing views and embodying confidence without arrogance. Credibility is not simply asserted. It is demonstrated through substance, style, and steadfastness. Pathos, stirring emotion, while credibility anchors speech, emotion propels it. Pathos is the appeal to feeling, an invitation to listeners to experience the subject matter viscerally. Cicero's speeches are replete with vivid imagery, carefully selected anecdotes, and evocative language designed to awaken sympathy, indignation, hope, or fear. He recognized that logic alone cannot move an audience to action. Emotion, artfully employed, acts as the catalyst. Effective pathos requires sensitivity. The speaker must gauge the audience's existing emotional state and respond with appropriate intensity. Overly dramatic appeals may alienate listeners, yet a sterile delivery risks disengagement. Cicero often modulated his emotional appeals by context, infusing his arguments with passion in times of crisis and restraint during deliberative sessions. In practice, pathos is built from the use of compelling storytelling, personal connection, and the rhetorical amplification of stakes, inviting listeners not merely to think, but to feel. Logos, arguing with reason. Logos constitutes the logical and rational dimension of persuasion. For Cicero, logic was foundational. His rhetorical structures followed the tenets of clear premises, causality, and sequential reasoning. Cicero would disarm opponents not merely with wit, but with irrefutable evidence, meticulous analogies, and cogent progression from premise to conclusion. To speak like Cicero means to construct arguments that withstand scrutiny. Logical appeals rely on facts, statistics, precedents, and the transparent analysis of cause and effect. The speaker must anticipate counter-arguments and address them forthrightly, admitting complexities where they exist and clarifying obscure points without condescension. Synthesis, crafting balance. The true power of Cicero's oratory resides in his deft balancing of ethos, pathos, and logos. Rarely does effective persuasion rest upon one alone. Cicero would introduce himself with gravitas, ethos, paint the stakes in vivid colors, pathos, and drive home his point with evidence and reasoning, logos. This tripartite structure is as relevant now as it was in antiquity. Balanced persuasion demands self-awareness and audience awareness. The speaker must ask, what emotional tone does the moment require? What logical structure will hold sway? What ethical persona will resonate? A deficiency in one area weakens the whole. An excess can breed distrust or banality. Practical application. To adopt Cicero's approach, begin each speech by establishing your credibility. Reference relevant experience, demonstrate honesty, and acknowledge the audience's concerns. Weave in emotion carefully, using stories and imagery to evoke empathy without overwhelming reason. Structure arguments clearly, grounding assertions in evidence and logical development. Practice is essential. Analyze Cicero's speeches, such as the Catilinarian orations, noting his transitions between ethos, pathos, and logos. Draft your own addresses, consciously marking where each pillar is introduced and how they interplay. Solicit feedback, asking your listeners which aspect rang true. Where might balance be improved? In conclusion, the art of balancing emotion and reason, as Cicero exemplified, transforms mere speech into persuasion. By mastering ethos, pathos, and logos, today's speakers inherit a legacy of eloquence as potent now as in ancient Rome, a legacy ready to be claimed by those who heed its timeless lessons. Chapter 9. Mastering Voice, Tone, Volume, and Timing. Cicero's mastery of rhetoric extended beyond the substance of his arguments to the orchestration of his delivery. The voice, its tone, volume, and timing, serves as the vehicle for meaning, amplifies intent, and can dramatically alter the perception of a message. In Cicero's era, the spoken word was a performative act, and every shade of vocal nuance contributed to the outcome. Tone, coloring the speech tone, encapsulates the emotional color of speech, the attitude conveyed through pitch, inflection, and resonance. Cicero recognized that the same words, differently intoned, could bring about encouragement or condemnation, urgency or contemplation. A speaker's tone must align with both the message and the audience's temperament. To develop a commanding tone, one must cultivate self-awareness. Is the subject matter solemn? The tone should evoke respect and gravity. Is it celebratory? Warmth and exuberance become paramount. Cicero varied his tone to mirror the audience, measured and formal before the Senate, impassioned before the plebeians. Tone requires adaptability as well as a sensitivity to context. Modern speakers can refine their tone by practicing with varied content, reciting poetry, delivering mock legal arguments, and reading stories aloud. Seek feedback on whether the intended emotion is perceived, and experiment with recordings to analyze subtleties. Volume. Manifesting strength and subtlety. Volume refers to the loudness or softness of speech, shaping the perception of authority and intimacy. Cicero believed in the strategic modulation of volume, not merely shouting to command attention, but knowing when to draw audience members closer with quiet intensity. Volume governs the geography of persuasion. A powerful crescendo inspires action. A careful diminuendo invites reflection. A skilled orator employs volume dynamically. Key points may be delivered with firmness, while nuanced arguments are articulated gently. Public speaking practice often suffers from monotony. Cicero's method demands variation. To master volume, practice diaphragmatic breathing and projection exercises. Test speech delivery in varied spaces, large halls versus intimate rooms. Develop the discipline to lower volume in moments of tension, thus compelling listeners to lean in, and raise it to galvanize collective action. Timing. Orchestrating rhythm and pause timing. The rhythm, pacing, and strategic deployment of pauses separates competent speakers from great orators. Cicero deployed timing with theatrical precision. The judicious pause before a key revelation, the steady acceleration during moments of excitement, the deliberate pacing in solemn discourse, each shapes the emotional journey of the audience. Pauses, in particular, are potent tools. Strategic silences underscore significance, allow listeners to digest complex ideas, and invite reflection. Cicero was famous for moments when he would halt, let anticipation build, and then unleash a striking point. Practicing timing involves reading speeches aloud, marking places for emphasis and pause. Metronomic exercises, speaking in tempo, then varying rhythm, help embed fluency. Record your speeches, noting where listeners disengage or lean in, and adjust pacing accordingly. Synergy of vocal elements, tone, volume, and timing must function in harmony. Cicero's speeches were symphonic. His tone ebbed and flowed with the argument's emotional arc. His volume soared and softened with dramatic needs, and his timing orchestrated suspense and resolution. This synergy transforms speech from mere utterance into artistry. For practitioners, rehearsal is essential. Begin with written texts, annotate vocal shifts, and rehearse aloud. Use feedback from trusted listeners to calibrate your delivery. Attend to the physical aspects, posture, breath control, and relaxation that undergird vocal strength. Application to contemporary speaking. Today's speeches, whether given in boardrooms, classrooms, or public gatherings, demand the same vocal craftsmanship Cicero championed. Technology introduces new variables. Microphones amplify, recording devices preserve nuance, and digital platforms add their own constraints. Regardless, the fundamentals endure. Develop a routine for vocal warm-ups, invest in voice training if possible, and practice with diverse audience sizes. The effective speaker knows not only what to say, but how to say it. Conclusion: to speak like Cicero is to wield the instrument of the voice with deliberate artistry. Mastering tone, volume, and timing elevates speech beyond simple communication, infusing it with persuasive power and emotional resonance. In adopting these practices, modern orators inherit not only Cicero's technique, but his enduring capacity to enchant, engage, and transform audiences. Chapter 10. Body language as persuasion, gesture, posture, and presence. Cicero's oratory transcended the limits of the spoken word, weaving gesture, posture, and physical presence into the very fabric of persuasion. In the ancient forums, where voice could be lost among the multitude, it was often the silent language of the body that furnished a speaker with authority and impact. Cicero's mastery of non-verbal communication lent his addresses a kinetic energy, synchronizing movement with meaning and forging a powerful connection between speaker and audience. Gesture. Speaking with the hands and arms gestures are the visible punctuation marks of speech. Cicero employed the expressive sweep of the hands, the pointed finger for emphasis, and the open palm to signal honesty and inclusiveness. Gestures serve to underscore an argument, illustrate complex points, and invite engagement. They are not arbitrary. Each motion communicates intent, emotion, and confidence. Effective gestures possess certain qualities. They are graceful, deliberate, and matched to the speech's content. Sudden or discordant movements can distract, while meaningful, measured gestures reinforce key themes. Cicero's own gestures mirrored his arguments. When invoking justice, he would extend both arms. In moments of outrage, his gestures were sharp and contained. Contemporary speakers should cultivate gestures that are natural extensions of thought, rehearsing them in front of mirrors and in video recordings. Practice avoids two pitfalls: stiffness, which conveys nervousness, and excess, which breeds confusion. Posture. Bearing witness to authority, posture conveys presence and assurance long before a single word is uttered. Cicero understood that an upright, open stance communicates readiness, respect, and leadership. Slouched shoulders signal disengagement or insecurity. Squared, balanced posture signals resolve and openness. The classical speaker would enter the forum with measured steps, back straight, head high, radiating a silence that demanded notice. Such a posture anchors the speaker physically and mentally, setting the tone for assertive and credible communication. Modern practitioners should focus on core strength, alignment, and relaxation. Exercises in Pilates, yoga, or simple standing drills build a habit of commanding posture. Awareness of bodily tension, the tight jaw, clenched fists, or hunched back, allows for gentle correction mid-speech. Presence. Projecting influence and engagement. Presence is the intangible resonance a speaker brings to any space, forged from the seamless integration of gesture, posture, and intent. Cicero's presence filled rooms. His mere arrival prompted attention and silence. Presence is built from self-confidence, eye contact, and purposeful movement. To cultivate presence, focus on mental preparation before speaking. Visualization exercises, deep breathing, and positive affirmations center the speaker. Upon entering the space, survey the audience, establish eye contact, and move with intention. Cicero's advice was to stand so that all may see you, speak so that all may hear you, and act so that all may remember you. Presence flourishes when speakers are fully in the moment, attentive, responsive, and unencumbered by self-doubt. Practice in diverse environments hones adaptability. Presence built in small meetings can be amplified for grand halls. Synchronizing body and speech nonverbal communication must never be divorced from words. Cicero's genius lay in the synchrony. Gestures timed to emphasis, posture adjusted for message, presence unwavering regardless of challenge. Coordinated body language ensures authenticity and magnifies the persuasive effect. Rehearse speeches with conscious attention to bodily movement. Videotape performances, not just for vocal clarity but for fluidity and congruence of gestures. Feedback from observers helps polish areas of stiffness or distraction. Overcoming common challenges. Anxiety often manifests physically. Restless hands, shifting weight, darting eyes. Cicero's approach for conquering nervousness involved ritualized preparation, physical relaxation, and the purposeful investment of energy into deliberate motion. Stage fright diminishes as body language is harmonized with intent. Some speakers struggle with gestures entirely, fearing ridicule or awkwardness. Begin with subtle movements, growing in confidence as natural motion returns. Each person's gestural style is unique. Cicero's art was never mimicry, but authenticity, application to digital and modern spaces. In virtual presentations, body language remains relevant, though limited by camera frames. Maintain posture, use facial expressions, and ensure that gestures are visible and purposeful. In all spaces, physical or digital, presence endures. Conclusion: Cicero's persuasion was not wrought solely from words, but from a holistic embodiment of meaning. Gesture, posture, and presence fused to create a tapestry of communication as rich as any spoken argument. To master these elements is to persuade not only the mind, but the eye and heart, rendering speech unforgettable, impactful, and distinctly Ciceroan. Chapter 11. Using imagery and metaphor to inspire. Cicero, renowned for his ability to captivate, inspire, and enthrall, relied on more than logical argumentation and authoritative presence. He was a master at conjuring vivid imagery and deploying powerful metaphors that transformed speech into an artful experience. These elements, far from being mere embellishments, are the engines of inspiration, clarity, and deep emotional resonance. The power of imagery. Painting with words. Imagery refers to the ability to evoke mental pictures, sensations, and emotions through descriptive language. Cicero understood that audiences, regardless of their sophistication, responded instinctively to concrete images and sensory experiences. In ancient speeches, he painted scenes of impending war, solemn justice, and the rewards or perils that lay ahead, each crafted to transport listeners from abstraction to visceral understanding. Developing imagery in speech requires attentiveness to detail and skillful selection of descriptors. Cicero would, for example, depict the chaos of rebellion through images of smoldering fires, glinting swords, and trembling citizens, lending urgency and authenticity to his warnings. Creating mental landscapes assures that ideas stick in memory and provoke action. Contemporary speakers should practice by observing their environment and translating ordinary scenes into language rich with color, texture, and movement. Comparing two short passages, one flat, one vibrant, reveals the magnetic pull of sensory description. The metaphor, opening new worlds of meaning. Metaphor, as used by Cicero, was a tool not only for clarification, but for emotional depth. By mapping one idea onto another, metaphors ignite imagination and allow complex or foreign concepts to become familiar and compelling. Cicero's metaphors were often drawn from nature, mythology, and everyday Roman life. When arguing for civil unity, he might liken society to a body, each citizen a limb, working harmoniously lest the whole become crippled. When chiding recklessness, he depicted statesmen as helmsmen steering blind through stormy seas. To craft effective metaphors, speakers must seek analogies that are relevant, fresh, and illuminating. Overworked metaphors lose power. Originality rekindles it. Review speeches by Cicero and other great orators, identifying metaphors and unpacking their connective logic. Imagery and metaphor as persuasive tools beyond beauty. Imagery and metaphor serve as weapons of persuasion. They crystallize arguments, invite empathy, and facilitate comprehension of complex subjects. A dry enumeration of facts is unlikely to move hearts, but the right image, a nation on the precipice, a justice as a sword and shield, can galvanize action. Cicero was deliberate in his choice of figurative language, employing it to highlight stakes and frame debates. In moments of crisis, he did not merely state dangers. He drew terrifying pictures, evoking collective dread or hope. In celebrations, his metaphors elevated heroes to mythic stature, inflaming pride and solidarity, cultivating inspirational speech to wield imagery and metaphor like Cicero. Speakers should cultivate a wide reading habit. Literature, history, and art all provide raw material for fresh inspiration. Practice journaling, describing emotions and situations in painterly terms. Experiment with analogies in conversations, noting where they clarify or confuse. Downplay the impulse to decorate speeches with empty ornamentation. Instead, pursue relevancy and resonance. Test with audiences. Does the image inspire, clarify, or distract? Application. Across contexts, imagery and metaphor transcend context, useful in debates, educational lectures, or even negotiation. Adapt them to suit formal tone or colloquial intimacy, always mindful of the audience's background and cultural references. Carefully chosen, figurative language can also help diffuse tension, soften criticism, or build bridges between conflicting parties. As Cicero did, use images not as armor, but as an invitation. Conclusion: Cicero's legacy teaches us that imagination is not peripheral to persuasion. It is central. Imagery and metaphor capture attention, fuel inspiration, and make the abstract tangible. In cultivating these skills, speakers become not merely communicators, but creators, summoning worlds in which ideas flourish, empathy deepens, and the call to action resounds. Chapter 12. The Art of Persuasion in Debates and Negotiations. Rhetoric stands at the crossroads of art and science. For Cicero, mastery of persuasion was the lifeblood of civic virtue, personal excellence, and political ascendancy. Nowhere was this more evident than in debates and negotiations. The crucible in which ideas confronted opposition, priorities were weighed, and consensus was forged. To persuade, Cicero argued, is to move hearts and minds along the arc of reason, emotion, and credibility, seamlessly intertwined. The foundation of persuasion lies in understanding your audience. Cicero stressed that effective communicators must analyze their listeners' values, beliefs, and emotional states. This process, known as audience adaptation, allows the speaker to shape arguments with precision. Cicero's own speeches demonstrate attentive calibration of tone, conciliatory when addressing allies, assertive amidst adversaries, and dignified in the face of neutrality. Before entering any debate or negotiation, the Cicero-inspired orator begins with keen observation, strategic empathy, and an assessment of shared goals. Central to Cicero's rhetorical framework are the modes of persuasion: ethos, credibility; pathos, emotional appeal; and logos, logical argument. Cicero treated ethos as the starting point, crafting a narrative of trustworthiness and moral character. Without credibility, even the most brilliant logic falters. Thus, in debate, the speaker must establish integrity, reliability, and authority, drawing upon personal experience or expert testimony. Pathos injects vitality into the argument. Cicero masterfully employed stories, vivid imagery, and stirring analogies, awakening empathy or urgency among even the most dispassionate listeners. Whether describing the plight of the Roman citizen or the stakes of a political decision, he crafted narratives that resonated deeply, believing that true persuasion springs from emotional response as much as reasoned analysis. Logos provides the intellectual scaffolding for persuasion. Cicero advised that arguments should be built upon clear evidence, structured reasoning, and robust rebuttal of counterpoints. In negotiation, this translates to presenting factual data, anticipating objections, and deploying logical progression from premise to conclusion. The Cicero-inspired negotiator eschews fallacy, grounds assertions in truth, and refrains from manipulative tactics. Persuasion in debate is not mere victory over opponents. Cicero viewed it as the triumph of better ideas, the forging of collective understanding, and the defense of ethical standards. To prepare, he recommended exhaustive research, strategic rehearsal, and contingency planning for unexpected turns. Each speech was meticulously crafted but flexible, a living response to the dynamic energy of real discussion. Negotiation, as Cicero practiced it, intertwines tact with conviction. The negotiator balances assertiveness with openness, seeking genuine consensus without sacrificing principle. Cicero's skill lay in presenting proposals clearly, clarifying positions without antagonism, and anchoring dialogue in mutual respect. He modeled the art of reframing disputes, transforming conflict into collaboration, opposition into opportunity. The Cicero-inspired approach employs questions as powerful tools. Socratic inquiry exposes assumptions, refines positions, and encourages reflection. Questioning can de-escalate tension, clarify misunderstandings, and promote problem-solving. Cicero advocated for strategic deployment of questions, not to entrap, but to illuminate shared interests or reveal the logic, or lack thereof, behind adversarial claims. Active listening is intrinsic to persuasion, as further explored in the next chapter. For now, it suffices to note that genuine engagement with opposing views is the mark of sophisticated rhetoric. Cicero advised restraint in interrupting, thoughtful acknowledgement of points raised, and measured response, practices that foster dialogue rather than division. In summary, Cicero's art of persuasion in debates and negotiations rests upon granular audience awareness, mastery of ethos, pathos, and logos, and the ethical pursuit of shared understanding. The modern orator is called not merely to win, but to elevate discourse, shape consensus, and lead with integrity. Through diligent application of Cicero's time-tested methods, you too may harness the ancient art of persuasion, achieving influence that shapes not only outcomes, but the very character of society itself. Chapter 13. Listening like Cicero, responding with precision. While Cicero is renowned for his magnificent speeches, his rhetorical excellence was equally predicated upon his profound capacity for listening. True persuasion, he argued, begins with understanding, a process that requires attentive, strategic listening as much as eloquent speaking. In the sophisticated dance of debate and negotiation, Cicero's skill in hearing, interpreting, and responding enabled him to wield words with unerring precision. Listening in Cicero's tradition transcends passive reception of information. It is an active, intentional, and empathetic engagement with another's ideas, emotions, and underlying motivations. This chapter explores how adopting Cicero's listening techniques can heighten your persuasive power and deepen the impact of your responses. At the heart of Cicero's method is the concept of analytic listening. Before crafting a reply, he would dissect the speaker's argument, isolating key themes, assumptions, and evidence. He advocated for note-taking during lengthy discussions, capturing the nuances of the opponent's stance. In modern practice, this means resisting the impulse to interrupt, instead focusing fully on the content, tone, and context of what is being said. Cicero also emphasized the importance of empathetic listening, wherein the orator not only processes facts, but attunes to the emotional subtext and psychological state of the speaker. By observing body language, changes in voice inflection, and facial expressions, Cicero could gauge whether an adversary was uncertain, defensive, or open to persuasion. Empathy allowed him to frame responses that acknowledged both emotional realities and logical arguments, diffusing tension and building rapport. Precision in response is the hallmark of Cicero's listening. Rather than broad, generic rebuttals, he crafted targeted replies addressing specific claims, clarifying ambiguities or highlighting contradictions. For Cicero, every response fulfilled at least one of three purposes: to support agreement, to challenge with respectful critique, or to build upon shared values. Repetition as a listening tool was another Cicero strategy. By paraphrasing what he had heard, "If I understand your point correctly, you are asserting," he demonstrated honor for the speaker's position and ensured faithful interpretation. This method, still central in mediation and negotiation today, prevents miscommunication and strengthens mutual understanding. Cicero's responses often began with concession or affirmation. In debate, he would first acknowledge valid points made by opponents, signaling intellectual openness and fairness. This tactical humility often disarmed adversaries, making them more receptive to subsequent critique. Cicero did not aim to demolish opposition, but to elevate dialogue, seeking truth through reasoned exchange, not through dominance. In responding with precision, Cicero stressed clarity. His replies were structured logically: assertion, evidence, conclusion, and he consciously avoided digression or confusion. To maintain direction, he often outlined the structure of his reply before elaborating, using verbal signposting such as, "First, let us address the facts. Second, the interpretation. Third, the implications." Listening also involves anticipating objections and preparing strategic counterpoints without succumbing to confrontational rhetoric. Cicero's approach was to forecast potential areas of disagreement and introduce balanced alternatives, presenting the opponent's perspective as worthy of consideration, even as he advanced his own. This practice fostered respect, intellectual openness, and often led to compromise. Finally, Cicero believed that listening is the avenue to persuasion in both personal and public life. By truly hearing the needs and motives behind arguments, whether in legal disputes, political negotiation, or philosophical debate, he could respond not merely to words, but to the deeper concerns that animate individuals and groups. Cultivating Cicero's precision in listening demands discipline, quiet confidence, and genuine interest in others. It transforms debates from contests of ego to collaborative searches for truth. Through analytic, empathetic, and methodical listening, you will enhance your ability to persuade, negotiate, and lead, laying the foundation for eloquence and influence that Cicero himself would recognize. Chapter 14. Overcoming Fear and Stage Anxiety. Even Cicero, destined for rhetorical greatness, confronted anxiety on the stage. His early orations were marked by trembling hands and faltering voices. The fear of public speaking is as old as speech itself, rooted in the vulnerability of exposure, the unpredictability of audience response, and the high stakes of persuasion. Cicero's journey to commanding presence offers a blueprint for transcending fear, transforming anxiety into energy, and cultivating the confidence essential for impactful speech. Stage anxiety manifests through physical symptoms: increased heart rate, dry mouth, sweating, and shaking. Psychologically, it presents as mental fog, self-doubt, and irrational anticipation of criticism. Cicero believed that anxiety originated from two sources: insufficient preparation and undue concern for personal reputation. By addressing both, he demonstrated that courage in speech is teachable and attainable. Preparation is the first defense against fear. Cicero insisted upon exhaustive mastery of subject matter, careful structuring of argument, and continuous rehearsal. He advocated for memorization of key points, not rote recitation, but deep internalization, enabling spontaneous adaptation during delivery. Cicero's speeches often included impromptu elements, crafted on the foundation of thorough preparation. Visual rehearsal, Cicero's favored method, invites speakers to imagine the entire event, entering the stage, seeing the audience, hearing their reactions, and succeeding in delivery. Athletes term this mental practice. For orators, it reduces uncertainty and fosters familiarity. Cicero's letters reveal his personal use of visualization, focusing upon positive outcomes and rehearsing responses to challenges. The cultivation of ritual calms nerves. Cicero developed pre-speech routines, breathing exercises, positive affirmations, and physical warm-ups. These rituals, combined with controlled pacing and deliberate pausing, allowed him to settle nerves before rising to speak. For modern speakers, establishing reliable routines, deep breathing, mindful reflection, and grounding movements creates resilience against anxiety. Perspective is key. Cicero urged speakers to view each speech as service rather than self-display. By shifting focus from personal reputation to the value provided, anxiety yields to purpose. Cicero's orations were acts of advocacy, whether defending the innocent or advising policymakers. The speaker who internalizes mission eclipses fear, channeling energy into conviction. Audience engagement transforms anxiety into connection. Cicero entered speeches with curiosity about audience needs, engaging with their reactions rather than fearing their judgment. In contemporary practice, this means making eye contact, asking rhetorical questions, and acknowledging feedback, converting anxiety-ridden moments into opportunities for dynamic interaction. Cicero's struggle with anxiety did not vanish. It became the source of his authenticity. He advised speakers to acknowledge nervousness openly when appropriate, using humor or candid confession to humanize themselves before listeners. Vulnerability invites empathy and reinforces credibility, showing that persuasion is as much an emotional journey as an intellectual one. Strategic pacing combats mental overwhelm. Cicero paced his speeches deliberately, using pauses to collect his thoughts, emphasize key ideas, and allow the audience to process information. This measured approach reduces pressure, providing time for composure and recalibration if distractions or unexpected challenges arise. Finally, Cicero cultivated self-reflection and continuous improvement. After each speech, he performed an honest appraisal, noting strengths and areas for development. Realistic self-assessment combined with celebration of growth prevents discouragement and sustains motivation. Modern speakers benefit from feedback loops, recording speeches, soliciting constructive critique, and journaling experiences. Overcoming fear and stage anxiety is an ongoing process, not a sudden transformation. Cicero's journey illustrates that rhetorical mastery is achieved not through the elimination of anxiety, but through its harnessing. Anxiety, properly managed, becomes a force that heightens attention, sharpens focus, and fuels brilliance. With Cicero as a guide, the aspiring orator transforms nervousness into the foundation of authentic, persuasive speech, finding courage in preparedness, purpose, connection, and continual evolution. Chapter 15. Writing speeches that are memorable and powerful. Cicero's speeches endure as masterpieces of composition. Their resonance stems not solely from delivery, but from the painstaking artistry woven into each word, sentence, and structure. Writing memorable and powerful speeches in Cicero's practice is both a discipline and an art, combining logical architecture, rhetorical flourish, emotional cadence, and ethical clarity. The first principle of Cicero's composition is clarity of purpose. Every speech must serve a distinct objective to inform, persuade, inspire, or advocate. Cicero began his process by isolating the central thesis, crafting a persuasive premise from which all elements of the speech would flow. Purpose anchors the speech, preventing drift and focusing energy on the desired outcome. Organization follows purpose. Cicero favored a tripartite structure: introduction, body, and conclusion. The introduction establishes context, frames the central argument, and seizes attention. Cicero's openings were legendary. He often began with provocative questions, startling facts, or stirring calls to values, capturing listeners from the outset. the body develops substance. Cicero marshaled evidence, layered arguments, and anticipated rebuttals, integrating ethos, pathos, and logos. Logical progression governed his arrangement. Points were outlined in sequence, each building upon the previous. Cicero included anchors, memorable phrases or metaphors repeated throughout the speech to reinforce themes and facilitate recall. Emotional resonance is core to memorability. Cicero infused his speeches with vivid imagery, historical allusions, and allegories. These literary devices evoked emotion, rendering abstract principles palpable and urgent. He taught that a speech must move both intellect and heart, balancing rational appeal with effective storytelling. Rhetorical devices abound in Cicero's writing: anaphora, repetition of words for emphasis; antithesis, contrast for effect; rhetorical questions; and parallelism. Each device, judiciously deployed, heightens engagement and sharpens impact. Cicero advised discretion, warning against excess and recommending moderation to preserve authenticity. Language precision distinguishes Cicero's composition. He selected words for their specificity, connotation, and rhythm. Syntax was varied to avoid monotony. Short declaratives punctuated longer, flowing sentences to sustain interest. Cicero balanced ornate vocabulary with accessibility, matching language level to audience expectation. Memorability is cemented by the crescendo. Cicero saved his strongest arguments and most evocative imagery for the conclusion, building emotional intensity and intellectual force to a climactic resolution. The closing reaffirmed purpose, inspired action, and left listeners with indelible phrases. Cicero's concluding appeals, calls to justice, liberty, or virtue, echoed far beyond the immediate moment. Revision was essential. Drafting and redrafting formed Cicero's process. He ruthlessly edited for clarity, economy, and impact. He read speeches aloud, listening for rhythm and resonance, and adjusted phrasing to suit oral delivery. Modern writers benefit from similar practices: iterative editing, peer review, and rehearsed presentation. Visual aids, though absent in Cicero's era, now complement written speeches. Integration of supporting materials, charts, images, stories, provides multisensory engagement, anchoring abstract points in tangible experience. Cicero's philosophy remains: every element must serve the central thesis, reinforcing the theme and supporting persuasion. The ethical dimension is integral. Cicero's speeches advance justice, truth, and civic virtue. He cautioned against manipulation, misinformation, or emotional exploitation. Powerful speeches derive force from honesty and alignment with shared values, seeking not victory at any cost, but the triumph of higher ideals. In conclusion, writing memorable and powerful speeches demands clarity of purpose, architectural organization, emotional resonance, rhetorical dexterity, linguistic precision, and ethical commitment. Through Cicero's methods, the modern speaker crafts works that endure, moving minds, stirring hearts, and inspiring action long after the final words have faded. Chapter 16. Defending Truth and Justice, Speaking with Integrity. Cicero's enduring legacy arises not merely from rhetorical brilliance, but from his steadfast commitment to truth and justice. In an era fraught with political intrigue and moral ambiguity, Cicero stood as a beacon, defending the innocent, advocating for ethical governance, and refusing to compromise integrity for expediency. To speak like Cicero, the orator must intertwine persuasive power with unwavering honesty, forging arguments that withstand scrutiny and advance genuine good. Integrity is the axis of persuasive leadership. Cicero believed that rhetoric's true function was service to truth, to justice, and to the greater good. He warned that deceptive tactics, emotional manipulation, or selective presentation corrode trust and undermine authority. The speaker's reputation, once tainted by dishonesty, cannot easily be repaired. Thus, Cicero's speeches were marked by rigorous adherence to fact, transparency of motive, and clear moral position. To defend truth, Cicero demanded a thorough investigation. He painstakingly assembled evidence, cross-examined witnesses, and refused to rely on rumor or conjecture. In constructing arguments, Cicero differentiated between demonstrable facts and interpretative claims, presenting sources and context with meticulous care. The modern speaker mirrors this approach. Diligent research, verification, and frank acknowledgement of uncertainty sustain credibility and foster trust. Justice, as Cicero viewed it, required advocacy for those marginalized or misrepresented. His defense of the accused in legal proceedings and his warnings against tyrannical overreach established him as champion of equity. In public speech, Cicero elevated argument above self-interest, making the cause itself, rather than personal gain, the centerpiece. The ethical speaker today must emulate this selflessness, activating persuasion on behalf of principles rather than merely objectives. Integrity also manifests in transparency with the audience and opponents. Cicero did not conceal the weaknesses in his case. Instead, he addressed them candidly, reframing limitations as opportunities for deeper understanding or compromise. He enjoined speakers to admit error, accept criticism, and demonstrate intellectual humility, a stance that fosters openness, diminishes defensiveness, and enhances persuasive power. Ethos. The character of the speaker underpins every act of persuasion. Cicero taught that persuasive impact arises not alone from argument, but from the moral authority perceived by the audience. Cultivating ethos involves active demonstration of reliability, fairness, and empathy. This ongoing process extends beyond singular speeches, permeating all interactions and shaping reputation over time. Justice demands courage. Cicero's speeches sometimes provoked powerful opposition, yet he persisted in presenting the unpopular truth, enduring personal risk for the sake of civic betterment. The contemporary orator must similarly resist pressures to appease, distort, or remain silent. Speaking truth to power is the highest act of rhetorical courage, requiring the speaker to weigh consequences and choose integrity irrespective of comfort. Listening, as previously discussed, is critical to justice. Cicero honored all voices, opponents, allies, and the marginalized, ensuring that dialogue reflected genuine pluralism. Justice in speech means creating space for all perspectives, considering competing interests, and aiming for solutions that maximize fairness and minimize harm. Integrity in persuasion extends to method as well as message. Cicero abjured manipulative tactics, emotional exploitation, ad hominem attack, or rhetorical trickery. He advocated for transparency in intention, clarity in argument, and respect in delivery. The ethical speaker deploys persuasion as an instrument of education and advocacy, not coercion. In summary, speaking with integrity, as Cicero did, involves foundational commitment to truth, justice, transparency, humility, courage, and respect. The persuasive power thus created serves not merely private advantage, but the public good, guiding listeners toward wisdom, equity, and communal flourishing. Cicero's model compels us to elevate rhetoric, to make it not the art of winning, but the architecture of society's conscience. Chapter 17. Adapting ancient techniques to modern audiences. The perennial relevance of Cicero's rhetoric lies not only in the precision of his words, but also in his profound understanding of audience dynamics. His speeches were meticulously crafted to respond to the concerns, values, and expectations of his listeners. In a rapidly evolving world, the challenge for modern communicators is to distill these timeless strategies and adapt them to the immediacy and diversity of contemporary audiences. Understanding Cicero's audience-centric approach. Cicero's effectiveness as an orator was not rooted in rigid formulas, but in adaptive intelligence. He would study the political climate, the cultural backdrop, and even the social biases of his audience before composing his arguments. This audience-centric approach ensured that his rhetoric resonated, whether he was defending a client in court or rallying support for the Republic in the Senate. Today's speakers encounter a multitude of audience contexts, boardrooms, virtual platforms, and public forums. Each setting demands awareness of demographic diversity, varying attention spans, and evolving forms of engagement. To adapt Cicero's techniques, we must begin by thoroughly researching our audience. What are their values? What motivates them? What are their fears, hopes, and expectations? Crafting messages for relevance and resonance, Cicero believed that the orator must be a bridge between complex ideas and the lived experiences of listeners. He advocated for the use of anecdotes, analogies, and vivid imagery, techniques that help abstract concepts come alive for any generation. Modern speakers can emulate this by weaving relatable narratives and employing metaphors that align with contemporary sensibilities. For instance, when addressing a technology-driven audience, referencing innovations or digital culture can make classic truths more salient. Similarly, in multicultural environments, recognizing and respecting linguistic or cultural nuances enhances receptivity. Cicero's practice of tailoring language and references to the specific cultural norms of his audience offers a model for respectful and effective communication today. The role of delivery and emotional intelligence. Cicero was acutely aware that the manner of delivery is as crucial as the content of a speech. Tonality, pacing, and nonverbal cues contributed to the persuasive force of his oratory. In the modern era, emotional intelligence, empathizing with the audience's mood, anticipating reactions, and navigating sensitivities is paramount. Adapting Cicero's methods requires practicing active listening, reading room dynamics, and responding flexibly to feedback, both verbal and non-verbal. Engaging virtual audiences presents its own challenge. Visual cues are limited and distractions abound. Adapting Cicero's theatrical flair can mean cultivating expressive vocal modulation, clear enunciation, and strategic pauses. In-person presentations still benefit from his mastery of gesture and eye contact, anchoring each point with sincere physicality, ethical adaptation, integrity above all. Cicero warned against manipulation and falsehood, consistently emphasizing the ethical responsibility of the orator. Modern adaptation must grapple with digital misinformation and the temptation to prioritize popularity over truth. Cicero's stance encourages us to earn trust through authenticity, transparency, and genuine commitment to the welfare of our audience. Actionable steps for modern speakers to translate Cicero's techniques into meaningful modern practice. Analyze your audience before preparing your speech. Use surveys, conversations, or observation. Craft your message with narratives and metaphors relevant to contemporary issues or experiences. Refine your delivery with attention to emotion, timing, and physical presence. Prioritize integrity by speaking truthfully and cultivating trust. Seek feedback and adapt continuously, recognizing that each audience offers a new learning opportunity. By mastering the art of adaptation, speakers honor Cicero's legacy and embrace the transformative power of eloquence in the present day. Chapter 18. Lessons from famous Cicero speeches. The corpus of Cicero's speeches is a treasure trove of rhetorical ingenuity. Among his most celebrated are the Catiline orations, the defense of Milo, and his philosophical treatises delivered in public. Each speech encapsulates specific lessons, doctrines of persuasion, strategic argumentation, and moral positioning that modern speakers can incorporate into their own practices. The Catiline orations, dealing with crisis. The series of speeches against Lucius Sergius Catilina, a senator accused of conspiring against the Roman Republic, displays Cicero's mastery in addressing urgent crises. beginning with his famous Quo usque tandem abutere Catilina patientia nostra. How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience? Cicero immediately establishes the gravity of the situation and directly challenges the antagonist. This opening demonstrates the value of bold engagement. They command attention, frame the debate, and set expectations. Many modern contexts call for directness in moments of crisis. When addressing organizational upheaval, public emergencies, or contentious debates, Cicero's approach underscores the importance of confronting challenges head-on, using rhetorical questions and assertive declarations to galvanize resolve. Defense of Milo, balancing logic and emotion in his defense of Titus Annius Milo, accused of murdering political rival. Publius Clodius, Cicero crafts an intricate argument, balancing legal precedents with appeals to emotion. He systematically deconstructs the prosecution's case while carefully evoking empathy for Milo's predicament. Here, Cicero illustrates the power of combining logos, logic, with pathos, emotion. Communicators today can draw from this dual approach, meticulously presenting facts, then reinforcing them with stories, emotional highlights, and personal reflection to foster empathy. Legal professionals, crisis managers, and leaders can especially benefit from structuring arguments that not only inform, but also engage emotionally. The Philippics, upholding morality and public duty. Cicero's Philippic speeches against Mark Antony are characterized by unwavering moral conviction and a call to communal duty. In fighting for the survival of the Republic, Cicero invokes shared Roman values and personal responsibility. The moral high ground, paired with vivid historical references, strengthens his persuasive appeal. Speakers today must often champion causes, whether in advocacy, leadership, or activism. Cicero's moral appeals teach us the value of aligning arguments with ethical imperatives and collective identity. By drawing on shared history, principles, or organizational culture, modern orators can inspire unity and action. Structural and stylistic lessons. Cicero's speeches were meticulously structured, often following the classical arrangement: exordium, introduction; narratio, narration; confirmatio, argument; confutatio, refutation; and peroratio, conclusion. This organization ensures clarity, momentum, and comprehensive persuasion. Furthermore, Cicero's style, rich in metaphor, parallelism, and rhetorical questions, endows his words with memorability and impact. Modern speakers can apply these structures to organize complex presentations and maintain attention. Practicing stylistic flourishes, such as repetition for emphasis or vivid descriptions, enhances engagement in any setting. Reflection and application. By analyzing Cicero's most famous speeches, we learn the value of courage in crisis, the union of reason and emotion, and the power of ethical conviction. These lessons are not mere historical curiosities, but timeless guides for navigating today's communicative challenges. To integrate Cicero's insights, open with impact in moments of urgency, structure arguments systematically, blending logic and emotion, appeal to shared values to inspire collective action, employ rhetorical devices for strength and memorability. In this way, Cicero's legacy becomes a living resource for anyone aspiring to speak with persuasive force and enduring influence. Chapter 19, Daily Practice, Building Eloquence Through Consistency. Eloquence is not an accident of birth, but the culmination of daily discipline. Cicero, despite his natural gifts, was relentless in his pursuit of rhetorical perfection. He advocated for consistent practice, routine reflection, and continuous learning, all habits that develop the muscles of persuasive speaking. Establishing a daily ritual, Cicero's mornings were devoted to writing, reading speeches aloud, and memorizing classical texts. He practiced improvisation and debate, pushing his limits to anticipate every possible scenario. Modern speakers, inundated by distractions and competing priorities, must carve intentional time for similar cultivation. A practical daily ritual might involve reading exemplary speeches for inspiration and technique, writing short essays or arguments on topical issues, practicing speeches aloud, focusing on articulation and rhythm, recording performances and reviewing them for improvement, engaging in dialogue or debate with peers, testing ideas and responses. Consistency, even if practiced for 15 minutes a day, compounds into exponential growth in skill and confidence. Mindful reflection. Cicero documented his strengths and weaknesses, not as a source of discouragement, but as a roadmap for continuous refinement. Modern communicators can benefit from maintaining a rhetorical journal, tracking progress, noting areas for improvement, and celebrating milestones. Reflective questions might include: what arguments resonated most with my audience? Which parts of my delivery felt awkward or unclear? How did my emotional tone align with my content? Are there new rhetorical devices I wish to try? This self-awareness fosters intentional development, diversifying practice contexts. Cicero did not limit himself to public forums. He conversed in private, debated informally, and experimented with tone and style in various settings. Practice need not be solely formal. Strive to adapt techniques in everyday conversation, social interaction, or digital communication. For contemporary speakers, attempt extemporaneous speaking at gatherings. Lead meetings or discussions with a persuasive structure. Record short video messages to improve performance under pressure. Engage in online forums, blogs, or podcasts. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice and hone your voice. Learning from others, Cicero studied both his rivals and allies, evaluating their strengths and shortcomings. Modern eloquence building involves immersing oneself in a community of communicators, attending lectures, watching debates, or joining public speaking clubs. Feedback from mentors and peers is invaluable. Constructive critique refines style, technique, and confidence. Collaborative practice fosters resilience and adaptability. Tracking progress and celebrating growth. Eloquence blossoms through incremental growth. Celebrate successes, whether an effective presentation at work or an eloquent toast at a gathering. Reward yourself for consistency, update your ritual, and set new goals. Overcoming obstacles. Cicero's life was riddled with personal and political adversity. He persevered through censure, exile, and relentless opposition. Building eloquence requires similar resilience. Embrace setbacks as learning moments. Persist through self-doubt and external criticism. Conclusion: by committing to consistent daily practice, cultivating mindful reflection, and embracing diverse growth opportunities, any speaker can build eloquence in the spirit of Cicero. The pursuit is lifelong, but every day brings new progress, confidence, and the possibility of transformative impact through words. Chapter 20. The Modern Orator. Becoming a Persuasive Leader Today. The legacy of Cicero endures not only as an exemplar of ancient artistry, but as an inspiration for the modern orator seeking impact and influence. Today's challenges: rapid technological change, information overload, and cultural complexity demand leaders who can speak persuasively, build consensus, and inspire action with clarity and confidence. Leadership through eloquence. Modern leadership transcends titles or organizational hierarchies. It is defined by one's ability to communicate vision, mobilize teams, and resolve conflict. Cicero's strategic use of rhetorical techniques exemplifies the leader's role as a communicator par excellence. His ability to synthesize complex ideas, articulate purpose, and rally support remains a gold standard. Leaders must master the art of storytelling, painting visions of the future that resonate emotionally and logically. Cicero's speeches were replete with stories that connected personal experience to civic duty, moving audiences from passive listeners to active participants. Adaptation in a digital-era technology has transformed the landscape of public discourse. Virtual platforms, social media, and collaborative tools enable broader reach but also fragment attention and dilute depth. The modern orator must tailor messages for brevity and clarity while sustaining depth and authenticity. Cicero's principle of aptum, the fittingness of a speech to its occasion and medium, guides us in choosing the right format, timing, and style. Adapt presentations for various platforms, ensuring messages are clear and compelling, whether delivered in person via video or written in digital format. Cultivating emotional intelligence leadership requires empathy and emotional sensitivity. Cicero's presence, his attention to mood, his capacity to read reactions, taught the importance of emotional intelligence. Modern leaders can cultivate this by active listening in meetings or debates, validating diverse perspectives, adjusting tone and approach to suit context and audience mood. Empathy fosters trust and collective commitment, essential ingredients for persuasive leadership. Integrating authenticity and authority. Cicero balanced authority with approachability. He leaned on facts, law, and reason, but never relinquished his personal integrity or relatability. In a world skeptical of polished spin, authentic communication builds lasting trust. Leaders should speak from genuine conviction, confess uncertainties when appropriate, and share personal stories that humanize their message. Authority is sustained by expertise. Authenticity is built through vulnerability, leading through challenges and change. Effective leadership in moments of upheaval mirrors Cicero's courage in the face of crisis. Orators must rise to confront challenges, frame narratives that give meaning to change, and unite audiences in purpose. Strategies for persuasive leadership include structuring messages to address concerns and propose solutions, employing repetition and rhythm to anchor key points, invoking shared goals and values to galvanize unity, continuous development and legacy. True orators and leaders commit to lifelong learning. The pursuit of eloquence is endless, as each challenge demands new adaptation, new insight, and new mastery. By following Cicero's example, modern leaders become artisans of influence, capable of moving individuals, organizations, and societies toward higher ideals through the power of words. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.